Welcome to this explainer. Look, I completely get it. A 130-page state government budget document probably doesn't sound like a thriller, but we're going to unpack the Kansas Judicial Branch's fiscal year 2026 budget request. And I promise you, there is actually a really engaging story hidden in here. This isn't just a giant spreadsheet of numbers. It's really a blueprint for justice. We're talking about a story of incredible resilience, rapid modernization, and a massive sense of civic duty aimed at serving every single person in Kansas.
So I want you to start by just asking yourself, what does it actually take to run an entire state court system? Because we are talking about an infrastructure that handles hundreds of thousands of cases every single year. These aren't just pieces of paper filed away in some dusty cabinet. These are cases that literally change lives, they impact families, and they reshape local communities. It takes a monumental amount of planning, incredibly dedicated staff, and honestly, some major financial resources to make sure disputes are resolved fairly and without huge delays.
And recently, those resources were put to the ultimate test. If you didn't know, back in late 2023, the Kansas courts got hit with a severe cyber attack. It was an absolutely unprecedented challenge that threw a wrench into everything. But, the system proved how resilient it is. The workforce completely rallied. They navigated some insane obstacles to bring the state's digital systems back online safely. And honestly, that high-stakes reality is exactly what makes this upcoming budget request so crucial. They aren't just asking for money to keep the lights on, they are actively fortifying the entire system against whatever challenges come next. Okay, let's dive right into this. We're going to break this explainer down into 5 quick areas. First, the business of justice. Second, a brief history of the courts. Third, the 5 goals for the future. Fourth, investing in the workforce. And finally, how the courts actually get funded. Section 1. The business of justice. Handling hundreds of thousands of cases annually. When you're reading a budget request, it is super easy to get bogged down in all the administrative jargon, but we really need to ground this in its real-world footprint. Running a unified state court system is just a massive enterprise. It touches every corner of the state, from a simple traffic ticket to complex civil litigation. To put that into perspective, in fiscal year 2024 alone, the district and appellate courts collected over $47.4 million in revenue for the state government. That's docket fees, surcharges, fines, the whole shebang. That money flows through the courts and gets distributed by the state treasurer to fund things like law enforcement training and community corrections. It's a massive operational hub. Moving to Section 2, History of Kansas Courts, a legacy of continuous modernization. Now, to really grasp what they're asking for in 2026, we kind of have to do a quick historical zoom out. The court system we rely on today didn't just magically appear. Its roots go all the way back to 1854, literally before Kansas was even a state. But look at the modern milestones here. In 1965, they set up the Office of Judicial Administration to centralize everything. In 77, they unified the trial courts and created the Court of Appeals to streamline cases. And jump to 2011, they launched Project Pegasus, a major study to figure out the actual workload of judges and clerks. Every single structural change on this timeline was designed to make the courts run better. And as you'll see, the 2026 budget is just the next logical step in that exact same evolution. Section 3. 5 Goals for the Future, the FY 2026 Blueprint. So bouncing back from the cyber attack, and after years of just trying to stabilize salaries, the Chief Justice has laid out a really forward-looking blueprint. It boils down to 5 main strategic goals. First, improving core operations and access to justice. Second, dedicating funding specifically for specialty courts. Third, a 5% cost of living adjustment for employees to combat inflation. Fourth, significantly bolstering IT and cybersecurity. And fifth, building a brand new Kansas Judicial Learning Center. Now, what's really interesting here is this heavy focus on specialty courts. These are not your traditional everyday trial courts. These are targeted, highly innovative forums designed specifically to reduce recidivism, basically stopping people from reoffending in local communities. This budget requests dedicated funding through a specialty court resources fund, so these programs can actually pay for their day-to-day operations, like staff travel and salaries, even if outside grant money dries up. It's a hugely proactive investment in community safety. And if we zoom in on that first goal, improving core operations, they aren't just asking for a blank check. They have a very practical 4-step plan. Step 1, roll out a secure digital evidence solution so people can upload files electronically. Step 2 is actually fascinating. They want to expand speech-to-text software to create written records, which directly tackles a massive shortage of human court reporters across the state. Step 3 bumps up access to justice innovation grants to over $1 million for local programs.
And step 4, funding the translation of court forms into other languages to meet federal mandates. These are super practical upgrades that really help everyday Kansans interact with the legal system.
I also absolutely have to highlight this fifth goal because it's such a cool concept. The budget asks for funding to kick off architectural planning for the Kansas Judicial Learning Center. This would be built right on the first floor of the Judicial Center in Topeka. Imagine a highly interactive, student-focused space. It even includes a mock courtroom where kids can play judge or defense attorney. With the nationwide shortage of practicing attorneys right now, this is directly aimed at sparking civic interest and inspiring the next generation of legal professionals.
All right, Section 4, investing in the court workforce, tying judicial pay to a competitive market.
You know, a court system can have all the fancy software and beautiful learning centers in the world, but it is literally nothing without the people running it. For over a decade, the Kansas judicial branch struggled big time with uncompetitive salaries, leading to crazy high turnover. But thanks to some historic legislation called Senate Bill 229, starting in January 2025, judge pay is finally tied to a predictable formula based on the federal judiciary. It works like this. The baseline is the Kansas district judge, who will make 75% of what a U.S. district judge makes. Then everyone else scales from there. A Court of Appeals judge makes 110% of that baseline. A Supreme Court justice makes 120%. And the Chief Justice makes 125%. It takes all the guesswork out of the equation.
Let's put those percentages into some real-world perspective. Take the Chief Justice's salary. Right now, it's sitting at just under $173,000. But under this new formula, that jumps to an estimated $237,000 in 2025 and over $244,000 by 2026. Now, this isn't just about handing out raises for the fun of it. It's a highly calculated move. If the state wants to attract incredibly experienced, diverse legal minds to decide our most complex disputes, they have to narrow the massive pay gap with private law practice. They have to offer a competitive rate. Section 5. How courts are funded. The vital shift to financial stability. We've talked a lot about the what, but we need to talk about the where. As in, where is this money actually coming from? Because recently, the entire architecture of how Kansas funds its courts completely changed. The old way was a bit of a nightmare, honestly. They had to rely heavily on court user fees to fund core operations, meaning the budget would wildly fluctuate year to year based on how many fees were collected. Totally unstable. But the new way, championed back in 2022, transitioned that core funding directly to the state general fund. Fees are still collected, sure, but they go straight to the state treasury, and the courts just get a reliable, set budget in return. And the sheer scale of that shift is really obvious in the data. Out of the $251 million adjusted budget request for FY 2026, over $239 million is slated to come directly from the state general fund. It is this exact structural shift that allows the courts to actually plan for the future. They can invest in cybersecurity and upgrade their tech without constantly sweating over whether fee collections might randomly drop next month. To wrap up our explainer on this budget blueprint, I want to circle back to the Chief Justice's own words. She reports that despite the absolute trials of the past year, especially fighting off that cyber attack, the Kansas judicial branch is growing stronger. The investments they are asking for here, they aren't luxuries. They are the essential, critical tools needed to put the safety of Kansans first, keep the system functioning, and make sure justice is actually accessible to everyone. So, with her official signature, Chief Justice Marla Luckert formally submits this entire vision to the legislature. It is essentially a stamp of approval on a strategic plan that honors 170 years of history while finally stepping firmly into the modern digital age. Which leaves us with one final thought. When you strip away all the spreadsheets and the bureaucratic formatting, state budgets are ultimately just reflections of what we prioritize. So as the system continues to modernize its tech and heavily invest in its workforce, how do you see these changes shaping the future of justice in your own community? It's definitely something worth thinking about the next time you walk past a courthouse. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.